Hello, this is Lisa LeRose on Connect to Love on PRN.FM, and I'm joined by my co-host, the wonderful Michael J. Russ. And today we have a very, very special guest. I'm so excited to share her work with you because it is, to me, so important. Her name is Annie Brook, and I'd like to just welcome you both before I start. So welcome, Michael, and welcome, Annie.
Oh, thanks so much.
Glad to be here.
Pleasure to be here.
Yeah, thank you. So
Absolutely.
I was, as often, Michael knows this, and Annie, I'm so grateful. We call this show Connect to Love, and I find that when we do connect and we drop into our heart, there's a frequency that we emit and we send out to the universe, and those that are in harmonic resonance with that are drawn to it. And you reached out to Michael, which I found so beautiful because his work resonated with you. And, it's, as we talked a few episodes ago about how we plant the seeds and we don't know when they're going to bloom and where it's going to take fruit and really multiply. So, it just tickled me that you reached out to him. And so I like to always start with a quote, and this particular one came from a young man who wrote a book called 101 Quotes That Will Change Your Life. And he said, "When the clouds pretend to block out the sun, remember that the sun is always still shining." And then he went on to say that on your journey toward a positive outlook on life, you're going to have mornings when you feel the excitement of living. You'll arrive to work with a confidence that you only see, with 1%. Then in a blink of an eye, something that can happen that will knock you to the bottom of the pack. When this happens,
Right.
You need to know your dreams and goals are still in the same place you left them. They may be hard to find when you let negative thoughts enter your mind, but they still have influence. No matter what small obstacles, block that have entered your day, you must hit back with 99% of your mind. Never let the little things block out your vision you've been fighting for. Your goals are still shining if you refuse to let the obstacles cloud your vision. Surround your vision with sunshine, and clouds will only be an illusion. And I have to say, Annie, that when I read your bio, it was so amazing. Not only do you blend psychotherapy and sensory motor neuroscience and play therapy, but it sounds as though you have had just an amazing journey. Though your practice is in Colorado, it sounds as though you have enjoyed time around the world, learning lots of different things, from a log cabin in Maine to a fishing boat in Alaska. And I thought, gee, she was making stoneware in Scotland. And I would absolutely love to hear a little bit about your journey, what brought you to somatic therapy, and how it really touched your heart, and what you would like to share about it. So first of all, welcome, and I'm so excited to hear what you have to share.
Oh, thanks so much. And it's been a wild ride a little bit. Fortunately, I grew up in a loving family, because I ended up with lots of experiences in life that were less than optimal. And I think what led me to really realizing that, there are things I can do. I call them the tools that heal, that have to do with my thoughts, my emotions, and reinforming my brain. Because in my early 20s, I was had built a log cabin. I had dropped out of college and gone to Maine, and we were going to start a water-powered furniture business, make furniture, and I was doing stoneware pottery. And so you have these young ambitions. And in all of that, and a lot of hard work, of course. So in all of that, just working away, and then my partner, without, there was some stresses between he and the other guys working in the mill, and pretty soon he was starting to drink a lot. And I was young. I was like, I didn't know anything about that. It wasn't something from my family pattern, And so here we were in this rural, isolated place, and all of a sudden I didn't have the person I thought I was connecting with available. And that became, that was like, whoa, what's going on here? And then and then I thought, well, maybe I'll join him, right? Maybe he always said, well, a 6-pack a day is just fine. And I was like, well, but you're slurring your words. So I didn't know what to do. And then my grandma had, given me a Kahlua recipe, and I thought, well, I'll just drink. I was starting to get unhappy is what happened. I was headed down this path. I had made a commitment. We had built our house. We had this project. We had our life defined. And I wasn't happy because I was missing some of those connect to love pieces. And then I almost became alcoholic myself. I started drinking Kahlua and milk, not a hard drink, but it was hard on my system. And I remember thinking, oh my gosh, I remember the day when I wanted to have 2 of those in one day, and I thought, oh, you are in trouble. And I could almost feel the black hole of falling into alcoholism. And so I went and I took the Kahlua, I went outside, I dumped it in the yard, and it was a bit of a beginning of a wake-up call. Like, oh, I'm a little bit out of control here, and my life is getting out of control. And I don't mean that we should control our life rigidly, but we do have to align it. We have to align it to our values. And so then what happened is I went to visit my family in Florida, and my partner burned the house down by accident.
What?
Yeah, right, here I am. Yeah, I'm like 22 or something, and all this hard work of years, and all of a sudden there's nothing left.
My goodness.
And so that's what I learned about shock. That when you get overwhelmed, you numb out. And that's a normal response. Some people get highly reactive, other people go numb. And I tended to go numb and put one foot in front of the other, just keep going. And so I got a job on a fishing boat to earn money off of Cape Cod because a neighbor up in Maine had a boat off Cape Cod, and he said, you could come fish, earn some money, come home once a month. So I was doing that, and it was just nothing but stress. Everything was stress and worry. I don't know if any of your listeners have been in a place in their life where all they could do was worry, but it starts to exhaust the brain's ability to function. And I had so much worry and fear build up in all of that. And then I had what's called a wake-up call when I was working on the fishing boat. We came in real low tide, and I had my basket of lobsters, and I climbed up this metal ladder, like 17 feet climb, and get up on the wharf. And then I was so numb, I just blanked out and let go of the ladder right at the top.
Oh, my goodness.
And that was crazy. Who wants to do that? Yeah? But when you're exhausted and you're full of worry and you're not thinking straight, there's something that the body does. I know all this stuff now because I had to study it to heal myself. But you can go into a freeze response where you're not processing the world around you. And sometimes you'll see people get so depressed they're almost catatonic, or they don't think straight. That's a body response to overwhelm. And one response is to freeze. If there's too much sensory input coming in, then what happens is the body sort of freezes. It can try to fight or run, but if there's, if it's the unseen enemy, like you can't fight it, then it can just freeze. And it's like if you have a rock and you throw it at ice or you throw it at a mirror, it's going to break into a bunch of pieces. And it can get highly creative. That's the gifted kids sometimes. They have all this creativity, but they can't relax in their body. And so I didn't know all this at the time. All I knew was I let go of this ladder, and all of a sudden I was held by this force field of love that was so powerful. That's all I could feel. Now, I was 23 years old. I felt like I was up in the air, watching my body sort of spiral. And it's a good thing I didn't fall straight down, because I would have landed on a water tank with rebar welded on top of it. But to the side of that tank was an old tire. And so I kind of spiraled through the air, and all I could feel was this love. And it was like, well, if my body survives, I'll go back. If it doesn't, I won't. But this love is what matters. And so it was an interesting place where I wasn't afraid. I wasn't worried, and I wasn't afraid. And then my body landed on the tire and bounced. And as soon as my body bounced, I was back in it. And I made a vow to myself. I want to feel that much love from inside my body. And I want to understand what spirit is about. You know, what is that depth of spirit that has guidance in it like that? And so within a couple months, I had quit fishing, and I had gone to, my sister was out in California, and I went to a meditation school, and I started studying meditation. And it was a kind of meditation called discursive, which was Sufi-based. Sufi's a kind of meditation philosophy. And very loving. But they had us do things with body awareness, like put your attention, you know, sit down, plant your feet, breathe, imagine you've got energy centers running through your body. So they were making me aware of my physical self. And then we would do a meditation like put your attention in your right shoulder, put it in your left knee, put it in your toe. And all of a sudden, instead of being fixated on my worry, my brain was shifting attention again. And that was such a relief. And I was becoming aware of what I felt instead of being numb. So this was eye-opening for me. And at the same time, I got involved in a 4-year training program called Healing Ourselves. And they used breath work and what's called Neo-Reichian. It's a kind of emotional body work process where you move energy through the body. It almost looks like you're tantruming sometimes, but you're actually releasing the rigidity and getting the flow back in your system. And that's a very simplistic way to describe it, but instead of bottling everything up and going numb, you're actually feeling again. And then I started studying movement repatterning, and I went back and actually practiced crawling as an infant because it shapes your brain. So all of a sudden, from being Miss Worry, I thought I was going to become a bag lady because I couldn't handle a job or a conversation. All of a sudden, I was stabilizing internally. And that became the guiding force of how do I, and then I started volunteering. You know, I taught at this meditation school, and I started seeing clients, and I volunteered at Children's Hospital to work with the children who had trauma. Because in that whole study process of my own healing, I also learned about birth trauma, which I didn't even know existed. But for me, post-birth, what I did is I read the book called The Magical Child. And when I read that book, I got mad because I realized, I was not, born and put on my mama and allowed to be with my mom. I was born early. I was premature, and I was whisked away into an incubator. And then I was poked and prodded and had tubes up my nose. And, that was kind of not so much fun for a newborn. And I realized, there's lots of reasons that I'm the way I am. Not a pathology, but just a discovery. Like, why would I have, as a kid, I had all these temper tantrums. And bless the parents who have these high temper tantrum kids. It's because the kids can't handle the stimulation. What we call a sensory motor loop is when our natural sensations can be processed and we can respond to it. So we're kind of in the flow. And that's our thoughts, our emotions, our physicality. We're not frozen or overwhelmed. And so one of the books I wrote was to help parents. It's called Help for Sensory Challenges. Because if you had that early development interrupted, there can often be in the primitive brain a protective response and a feeling of being threatened even when you're not. It's so interesting, the perceptual filters that live inside the brain. So anyway, this whole experience in my life led me to be very curious about, wow, I felt so much healing when I started meditating. I started breathing and moving emotions through my body instead of being reactive or being numb. And then I started repatterning my movement so I didn't default to the same old habits. And so I just fell into my work of helping others because I realized, I was very much on the brink of what felt like some very crazy-making places. And I know lots of people are when they get stressed out. Mm-hmm. And I was able to find the teachers and the teachings and the tools and sort of rewrite the ship. And learning that is something that you can do it's almost like a miracle. It's like, oh, there, but for the grace of God go I, right? I mean, we've all seen stress and what happens to our loved ones. And so if we can share, for me, I kind of developed a little passion of sharing what I learned that helped me and finding ways to continue to help others. So I became a psychotherapist, and I volunteered at Oakland Children's Hospital, and I worked with, the traumatized little ones there, and with sexually abused foster kids and gang youth and family therapy. And I just got my fingers in the pie of, wow, how do we relate? How do we stabilize and make life work? And so I learned a lot through experiential learning. I went and got a graduate degree in family systems therapy and organizational development, like how do groups work. But all of it had at the foreground of it, what is self-awareness? And how do you slow yourself down so you're not reactive? And how do you orient towards enjoying life instead of orienting to all the stress you've had?
I think
that is such a
that's
great,
so beautiful. Oh my gosh, I'm just so blown away. Go ahead, Michael, please.
No, I was simply going to say that you explained your journey thus far and how you got to this place in your life so eloquently. To me, I'm a big picture thinker. I can kind of see the path. I can clearly see the path that your soul chose to actually get to where you are right now. Why you chose, from your earlier experience, your self-awareness, and how that led to you to really just open up and be a vessel to receive all kinds of information along the lines of helping people. And you've really set yourself up to the point right now and are dealing with something that there's a huge need for what you are doing right now. I think that's the best way for me to put it.
Absolutely.
A huge need. There's absolutely, it's so amazing. I don't think that people really understand a lot of why they do what they do and why they shut down, and what you bring to the table is some clarity that can help them move forward in their lives. And I think that's awesome.
That's my wish. And, for people new to this idea that actually it's not about blaming other people, but it's about me taking charge. Oh, the first thing is to learn how to what I call stop in your tracks. to slow down your reactivity and reorient. So I have a little exercise. We can all do it. It's like where you take your hands and maybe you rub them together for a minute and imagine you're holding a little breathing ball. So that as if you have a little, inhale, exhale, little ball in your hands. And there's movement instead of a freeze response. So as that little breathing ball, in your imagination, your hands will move out a little bit, and they'll relax and come in, just like a breath. But why I like to do this through your hands is because you're literally interrupting any frozenness. You're showing your body that, it's okay to move. It's okay to move here. And so slowing down and breathing, not just focusing on your breath, but on the actual movement of breath, helps the brain realize it's not under a life-threatening circumstance. It doesn't have to freeze. It can take action. And what we want to do is get our sensory signals to go past our reactive brain up to our higher brain where we can creatively problem solve or get infused with knowing. Sometimes you hear a little voice inside that's, some people say God's voice or whatever, Spirit's voice or your intuition. You can't really hear that if you're frozen because you will be in a part of the brain that's called the limbic, emotional part of the brain that's really looking through old filters. Because for efficiency, it's better, if you were being threatened by a tiger, you learn to run away. So that's in your filter. It's in your file cabinet of, when this happens, I do this. That's why people can get reactive. Like one fellow I'm supporting, his dad would rage at him as a little kid. What's a kid going to do? They're going to freeze.
Right.
And so now he rages at his wife. And I'm like, you cannot do that. Just because your dad did that to you, and so I'm helping him actually interrupt the knee-jerk reaction of that behavior. And part of it is by slowing down, by giving a cognition to understand why his nervous system does that. So you have to have a little bit of that neuroscience understanding. But the biggest one is to breathe, use that breathing ball to slow down, to understand what I call the hidden stories behind difficult behaviors. And these are often the precognitive stories left over from birth. Like some kids who were pulled out by forceps, they can create power struggles their whole life. Or they can always, in an interaction, they're trying to headbutt, they're trying to be pushy because they were so pushed on. Or sometimes, it's fascinating, and I learned so much with
fascinating. It is. Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
I think about
that's going way back though.
It makes me think of a few people that I know, and you wonder why is it that they're always seem to be having challenges, no matter what it is that they do or try, that they always seem to get entangled back into those patterns. And one of the things, Annie, that when I was looking through your work, and it just really touched my heart, was when you said that the bodies are the stories of our life. And I just thought to myself, oh my gosh, like I always joke about, there's different people who call it a meat suit or whatever it is, that it's a shell. I always call it a shell, that it's this thing that we inhabit until we are free. Yeah, there's just a vessel. So would you mind talking a little bit about how you came to that realization about how bodies are the stories of our life, and also you said something about is the body safe? Because I think right now, there's so much dissonance in and Michael and I talk about this. How do we bring that dissonance and resolve it so that we can be in a place of safety and peace and connection?
Such a great question, and it takes some personal choice and discipline both. especially because the brain we can scare ourselves and compromise our own immune system. And that's what happens if you are always going to orient to fear, to being afraid all the time, or like me before, when I was always worry, my body was getting depleted because it's like wearing off the healthy myelin on the nervous system. You're overexciting the nervous system. So what I call these, how I came to understand them, is through my own inquiry work. Because once I was getting all those tools and starting to feel better, I had to sort of go back and go through my life. My graduate school, we were looking at, well, what happened in your family ancestry? You know, what happened in your family that shaped how you view the world? And eventually you just want to have, it's not like you want a clean slate because you've had your experiences. You just don't want them to be trigger experiences. And so when I talk about the hidden stories behind difficult behavior, that was an attempt to help parents understand their kids weren't just trying to be bad kids, that there was probably something irritating them, just like an oyster will make a pearl. You know, it's got that irritating sand, and then it calcifies around it so you can't get the sand out. And so with ourselves, even though our brain might shut down or something might have happened before we had cognition, that's what our thinking ability that comes in around the age of 3, we still have experience. We still have the cells knowing if they're being overwhelmed or terrified, or if they feel safe, or if they feel comforted. And that flow, that inner flow of containment, you know, a parent's job is to sort of contain their kids in a good way, give them enough structure so they feel safe, but not repress them. And that's a big job. But that quality of, wow, there's likely a hidden story. And then I started treating children just because I believe in, you know, intact families whenever possible, and helping children to tell the hidden story so they're not being a behavioral problem for their families. And these little 4-year-olds were showing me their birth stories. I had one little girl who had meltdowns. You know, her parent brought her to see me. She had a good family and good, you know, they were all fairly loving family and everything. And they couldn't understand, why is this 4-year-old having meltdowns in kindergarten? And often what happens is, if there's early stress or birth trauma left in the system, when there's extra stress, like going to school, it can show up. And so with this little girl, what she would do in school, and think about this for a moment, what is she showing you through her play? What she would do is she would go get another kid. She would build a barricade in the classroom. And so it was just her and this other kid behind the barricade. And then she wouldn't let the teachers in. And literally the teachers had to fight their way in and rescue the other kid. Yeah, and then she'd have these big emotional meltdowns. So I thought about that, like, what is she showing me? And the first time she entered my treatment room, my little office there, she walked into the corner where I had a little Japanese folding screen, and those have those little, you know, cracks between the 3 panels. And she peeks out through the panel, and then she starts ripping the soundproofing tape off the wall and taping up the cracks. And I was like, oh my goodness. Yeah, I was like, what are you doing back there? And she goes, very important work, and don't you come in. And I thought, okay, she is showing me a C-section birth here.
Wow.
This
a C-section
little girl,
birth, really?
Yeah. And we spent about, 20 sessions, her and her mom. And her mom, I always treat with the parent in the room. And her mom was verifying everything that showed up. The confusion, and it was the invasive force. And so what she was doing in her classroom was she was trying to keep herself and another kid connected. And then the teachers were the substitute doctors coming in and, destroying her world. And for people born C-section, everybody's celebrating the live baby, right?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, hooray, the baby's alive. You want to include the baby story. And I did see one video of a Duke physician, obstetrician, who actually talked to the baby before the operation instead of it being a complete shock. And, what happens with a C-section birth is it's very fast. You go from a fluid medium, which is very sensory,
right.
In womb, but normally you would push your way through the birth canal. So
right.
you would be getting the felt sense of what we call proprioception, like someone giving you a big squeeze, where you are. With a C-section, you don't get the big squeeze. And what happens is you get airlifted away from your mom, and sometimes even had to be pulled out because there's a little bit of a suction if the baby's head is already descended into the pelvis. And so it can feel fast, violent, and terrifying. And,
so
who would have guessed?
Yeah.
Oh, go ahead.
The question I have, excuse me, when the Duke doctor does this,
yeah.
I'm assuming have you spoken with him and kind of
I watched
asked him?
the video, and I watched the mother relax. And they had a little video, and and then I used this story with my people who come to see me, and they all just relax when they hear it if they've had a C-section. Because what the doctor says is, "Hello, little baby, I know you're in there." So the doctor's making it relational right away. Hello,
awesome.
I know you're in there.
That's
we
so
have to bring, isn't it? And then the doctor goes, and it's that simple.
Totally.
So, and the doctor goes, we need to bring you out a different way. So you're going to feel me, I'm going to have to open your mama up really fast, and you're going to feel my hands, and I need to find your head. So I need your help.
Oh,
I want you to help me find, isn't that awesome? And all of a sudden, the mom's relaxed, and it's not as traumatic as it could be, because it's relational, and there's a little, this is what's going to happen. There's a little prep. And so the baby's included as a sentient being, which it is, and it helps. So with the kids, once they tell their story, like this little girl, I have those little tunnels that kids can crawl through. And she got in a panic. She couldn't decide which end of the tunnel to put her mom at. That was another session. And that's, And so, she was just playing out the whole story. And eventually, I didn't want the doctor to be the bad guy, because the doctor also saved her life. And so we had to make sure, I had a goal that, no, we're not going to, demonize the doctor here. We're going to get rid of your fear, sweetheart. And so eventually I could say, well, the doctor just had bad manners. He wasn't trying to hurt you. And it wasn't until I got the mom to really own her choice to have a C-section instead of feel guilty about it, because the placenta was in the way. Then the mother said, okay. I said, you made a choice because you wanted a live baby. I think that was a good choice to make.
Yeah,
and then the mother, right?
Yeah.
And then the mother could feel empowered. And once the mother felt empowered, the girl relaxed more.
Oh, that's beautiful.
It's so interesting. It is. It's like this. You never know what's going to come out of these sessions, but if you stay with it and you understand the sensitivity of the nervous system, and she's the one who taught me that. No, it was a different girl. She was 6, who was born a preemie and was in the NIC unit. But she taught me that babies can make up identity beliefs that are inaccurate. And this 6-year-old believed she was bad. She believed, I'm bad. And she brought in a little card she'd made when we had started doing treatment. And bad, bad baby. I'm so, so bad. And this little crying, stick baby in a box in the incubator with big tears, every page, bad baby, bad, bad baby. And then on the back page, I am such a bad girl. And I was like, no.
Heartbreaking.
Babies aren't bad, right? And she didn't have bad parents or anything. Yeah. So anyway, I realized, that was her nervous system trying to figure out what was chaotic. It had no context to organize the chaos of being with her mom, without her mom, in the NIC unit, and it kept the fight response going. So when you self-attack, and I work with this with adults all the time, I bet there's people listening in who will know that they do self-attack thinking. They blame themselves for everything, and they're almost relentlessly self-attacking. That will exhaust your nervous system. And once you understand that self-attack was a very primitive brain fight response, because by having a self-attack, at least the self exists. And when there's overwhelming fear, you might not know you exist. And then by using the attack, you've got the fight response alive. So it's the nervous system's best attempt in an overwhelming situation. And it forms identity beliefs and behaviors. So I work with couples with this all the time. Not to blame, not to self-attack, not to play out the way you were raised as an infant it will play out, but you have to know it's going to and not let it derail your relationship. Because once those infant stories play out, you're trying to heal them. And that's back to the hidden stories. We want to tell the story so it can be put to rest. So this little 4-year-old...
Once the story...
Go ahead.
I'm sorry, I just want to say this question. Do you find that once they understand, become cognizant of what the story is, that it really creates this giant leap in healing?
Absolutely. Because the brain hates confusion. And if you can name the story and go, this is my early shock imprint, or, this is what it felt like when my dad died when I was a kid, or, this is what it felt like when my parents got a divorce, or, this is why I'm so overly attentive to my husband because I'm afraid we're going to get divorced, even though we're not even thinking about it, right? Because it happened as a kid. So you're almost creating the environment of the old story. And then the body will start behaving as if that's still happening. So once you can name the story or recognize your attempts to heal by telling the story unconsciously, and you make it conscious, that's where the leaps and bounds of personal healing happen. It's something we call cellular memory, is the story without the consciousness. Because the cells we experienced it. We call that, this was from Dr. Alan Fogel, who was head of the infant research lab at Salt Lake. And they were working with the babies and trying to help the babies and the mothers. And when the story goes from implicit, that means it's buried, and it starts to come to the surface, that's what we call explicit. Now it's an explicit story. So if you can name it, your brain is going to relax, because it knows what you're working with. And then how you participate in it will determine whether it re-traumatizes you or it heals you. And there's something I call staying on the surfboard, which means when you get to the stage of your own healing where you kind of know the story or you can imagine it, and you start to allow the story to bubble to the surface, because it will, then you have to stay on the surfboard of all of this discomfort, because we try to avoid our original discomfort from ever happening again. But what people don't know is their bodies are much bigger now and have more cells to process. And literally, unprocessed emotions make chemicals. If it's not sequenced sensory to motor, what happens is it stores its chemicals in the body, and that's why people can have, if anyone's a massage therapist out there, they might do a massage and someone has a flashback. it's because the touch has sort of warmed up the tissue, and now those chemicals are trying to tell the story. But if you can know the story good enough, parts of the puzzle, you can stay on the surfboard and let this wave of discomfort pass instead of becoming the wave. And that's the stamina as an adult to be the healthy adult, not letting your reactive child self run your adult life. And then you let that wave of emotion pass, and all of a sudden you're like, oh, phew, okay, I'm back. I can look around and orient. I'm not stuck in my retaliatory nervous system or my scared, dissociated self. And orienting is how we don't have to polarize and hate each other. We can stay oriented. We can actually have a discussion. It's not life or death threatening.
Right.
Wow. I'd love to delve into some of your books. And for any audience members that are joining us, we're with Annie Brook, and your website is anniebrook.com. And you've written some books on somatic, books on birth trauma and adoption, attachment and relationships. And, one of the things that really touched me was your connection to play, and how as adults we forget to play, and how I'm just very curious how, as because everybody takes things so seriously, we want to control things, and how do we get out of our brain trying to control get it to stop trying to control everything and get back to the place where we are connected to play, to creativity, to imagination, to where I believe the person that we were meant to be.
Oh, I agree with you there. That we're meant to have this creative, playful curiosity for life when we're not busy being afraid or blaming others. And so I did write a little book called Awakening the Creative Mind. And it has games, it has writing exercises that help you to improvise. And it has little sort of interactive games you can play as a family or with your partner. And I was fortunate when I went through that sort of deep trauma in my early 20s that when I went out to study meditation and all these new pieces of ways of being, one of them was studying with someone who taught improvisation. And it's like getting your brain out of the way, because our controlling brain totally wanted to organize everything. So this woman, Russ, she was a master teacher out in the Bay Area. And for 5 years I studied with her. I didn't know at the time that I was doing a life-enhancing skill set, that I was getting a life-enhancing skill set, which was that improvisational ability to make choices in the moment without getting locked in or fixated on my own opinion or what I should be doing, but actually to respond to what's happening. And that's how I work with kids so well and with people, is that I'm responding to them in the moment. She would have us do an exercise where we would be in just, moving around in a room. Maybe there were 10 of us in the class or something. And she'd hit a little wooden drum for rhythm. So she'd got this drum beat going, and she'd say, okay, you can do 5 things. You can walk, you can run, you can stop, you can turn. I guess it was 4 things. So we could only do one of those 4 things. But she was in charge of telling us which one. So here we are, you're listening to that rhythm, and she goes, stop. And she's beating the rhythm, and then she goes, run. And then you're running, and she's beating the rhythm, and she goes, turn. And so you can't do what you want to do. She's providing a kind of containment and structure with movement. And I watched, all of us watched our own brains try to sneak, right? Oh, well, maybe I'll skip. No, that wasn't one of the directions. Or maybe, she says run and I'll just plod along. No, that wasn't an option. And we started every single class with 20 minutes of this stuff. And I watched my brain slowly give it up.
Wow.
It's like, and then what happened is I became much more interested in the choreography around me, the interaction between people in the space. All of a sudden, I wasn't trying to be in charge of what I did. I was just free to be guided and to feel more. I was much more perceptive about where there was an opening in the room or where there was, there's 3 people together. Oh, look, they're bunched up in a corner. It's as if my perceptions became much more expanded because my mental body wasn't in the way. And so that's what I teach. I have this, I teach it live or I have it as a, self-paced class people can do because I found so many parents don't know how to play. And when they don't know how to play, they miss out on their kids.
Oh, 100%.
True. It's kind of drummed out of us. I call it the societal this path that of creating good little compliant consumers, and in your parents, it's all about if you continue to do that after a certain age, you'll embarrass yourself. You won't be taken seriously. All these thought viruses that the parents start implanting, giving to their kids about if you continue with that, and then you go to school and the same thing happens. They do the same thing. They reinforce that, and before you know it, you don't have any creativity or inspiration or joy anymore or play. You're not playing because you've now taken on the thought virus that play is bad. Play is not serious. Is not being serious.
Yeah.
It has no value in your life.
That's it. And
good.
Yeah, and it's so contrary to all of that. Play is where cooperation happens, creative problem solving, working things out is what real play is. This isn't just play, waste your time, distract yourself. Kids who are really playing, they're doing something.
True.
Even a little baby, down on the floor, they might be looking at something you don't even know they're looking at. But they're motivated. They're curious. And that curiosity is what is part of the health. And when we put kids right into sports, they don't get unstructured time to dig in the dirt.
Right. That is so true.
And parents are
trying to do that right. It all becomes crazy. The kids are. It's that sandbox time that is some of the most important time.
That's a good way to say it. It is the sandbox.
Yeah, when I was a kid, I had a 4-star mud pie restaurant. You could come anytime and serve you one up.
I love
serving up mud pie, were you?
Yeah, and one day I ventured into the tar on the road because it looked so interesting and gooey, not knowing that.
That petroleum is bad for you.
I didn't know that. It just looked inviting, right under my. Oh my God!
Of course.
I'll never forget that.
Yeah, exactly.
But that's a great thing about growing up in the first place. You thought it was cool. You thought it was. You didn't know it was what it was, and you were allowed to go out. You got out. You went out and did it. And what did you? You're laughing about it today, and the fact that you are means that it definitely was the lesson you needed to learn. In my view, it's interesting because I have to tell you, Annie, I was a 5.5 pound preemie. I think I was born normally. It wasn't a C-section back in '58, but I was born premature, 5.5 pounds, middle child, and I'm 64, and I play every day. My girlfriend calls me goofy all the time. I'm always playing, doing something. And that's because a lot of that is because I've learned not to take things so seriously, take life so seriously. Just seeing it in a different way, But I got to say something. I had no idea whatsoever that there were seemingly adverse consequences, or consequences that played out in an adverse way from having a C-section versus normal birth. I mean, to me, this is all. I don't have kids, so I'm just bowled over by the information that you're providing, the enlightenment you're providing about this. Because I can think of people out there, and I'm going, gosh, she needs to talk with you. He needs to talk with you.
Yeah.
Because, especially when you talked about, self-attack and blame. Self-attack and blame. I know somebody right now who's probably dealing with this same issue because, and you've just given me an idea about where to direct him to some of your books to kind of get a sense of what it is, why he's attacking himself incessantly, and the whole alcoholism thing. I've always said that somebody who drinks too much, one of the reasons, maybe not all of them, one of the reasons is because they don't like their state of being. They don't really they don't like where they are in life. They don't like who they are. They're just not. They're not happy with themselves and their life, and basically they want to feel differently than they do, and that's one of the ways to do it. Take drugs, smoke marijuana, and drink a lot, because it just completely takes them outside of the reality that they are actually creating for themselves. They want to create a different reality, but it's a false narrative, and it goes away, and they have to go right back to when the high wears off. They're back where they were, and it's just a
even
constant.
Worse, even worse,
they don't get any better
to the body.
Right, exactly.
I'm curious, Annie, have you discovered anything with breech birth where a child comes out feet first? Is there a disorientation? I'm just curious about that. What you were saying sounded so fascinating to me.
I want to make sure everybody knows that I don't think birth is a pathology. It's an experience.
Right.
And when you can decode the experience, then you've got some, like I worked with one kid who was born breech, and his mom would bring him in, and they were in such a power struggle at home. And so they came in for treatment, and he would literally get on top of the car and not come down, and I'd have to go out of my office and watch him and his mom in this power struggle. And it turns out for him, he was set up breech, which means you come out feet or butt first, not head first. And the mother went to a yogi teacher, like a yoga teacher, and to try to turn the baby. And so this guy was trying to sort of show off to his whole group that he could get this baby to turn. And so the woman went there with her midwife, because ideally you want the baby to turn around if possible. And he tried to sort of force this turning, and it didn't work. And the mother, was like describing what an awful experience that was, to be in that class with everybody watching, with him insisting. And so she finally walked out with her support person. And I thought, wow, if that's not the beginning of a power struggle, I don't know what is.
Sure. Wow.
And so with this kid, part of it is understanding, for me to really understand, he does things backwards. And he likes it. And so then I had the mom and dad in the office, and they were sitting there, telling me all the ways their kid wasn't behaving. And I just looked right at the kid. He's about 8. And I go, you like to do things backwards, don't you? And he got down on the floor. Literally, he crawled backwards. My office was like 12 by 12, and the chairs. He crawled backwards through all the chairs. He crawled backwards through the tunnel, and he sat back down and beamed with joy. And it was like, he told his story. It's
amazing.
Like, And so to know if you've had that, how do you care for yourself and your experience without it becoming a behavioral pattern that gets you in trouble? Like I had, I used to be a university professor and a master's in somatic psychology program. And some of the students, like one woman born breech, she was having a horrible time finishing her thesis. And she just couldn't go through the threshold. And we had to include, relax that whole story around, because breech can really pull on the jaw and the neck. It can have a difficult physical piece as well. But once she realized she wanted to do everything backwards, we had to help her find beginning, middle, and end, which is another improvisation game. We're coming towards the end. In a C-section, same time. A kid has struggles with transition sometimes because they had a difficult birth. And they won't, go from playing to getting ready to go to school. They'll struggle at the transition phase because the transition was full of fear. And so you want to help the nervous system relax, understand that birth was a moment in time. It's not forever. But your primitive brain doesn't have to hold on as if it's life-threatening now. Isn't that wild?
So true.
That's so amazing. Yeah, absolutely.
And I think if there's any, takeaway from people listening in, I would say, how do you relax enough and pause? Like the ground rules for self-care would be stop in your tracks and pause and breathe. So you don't get overwhelmed. Stay relational by looking around, orienting to the people near you, making eye contact so you're not reactive. And that way the sensory signal has a chance to go up to the higher cortex for creative problem solving, instead of getting derailed at the emotional history, the emotional level where you were defenseless and little, and you did these behaviors of protection. And so learning to stabilize your own nervous system and stay present instead of reacting is huge. And maybe, someone can chip away at one little piece at a time. They don't have to do it all at once. But you can go, wow, why is it that I get triggered by this? Somebody says something and I take it as a rejection. Well, maybe they weren't wanted when they were born. Maybe they were given up for adoption. Who knows? But your triggers will be the Hansel and Gretel breadcrumbs to help you find your way back home to heal. Because I love this quote, when you can claim the events of your life, all that you've been and done, which may take some time, you're fierce with reality. That means you're fierce with presence. You're present. You're not afraid. You're just there. And working through that so that waves of fear don't, engulf people, that they're like becoming overly afraid and then reactive in that process. That's Florida Scott Maxwell who said that quote.
That's so beautiful, Annie. I can't even tell you. I felt that so much in my heart, and just your words and your presence. I just felt all of my energies kind of sink in, and my whole system relax. So I'm so grateful to you for that, and I can't.
Absolutely.
I feel like we're just on the tip of the iceberg, Michael, and I know
so true.
Our time together, it just goes by so quickly, and I know we would love to have you back, and I want to make sure that you can let our audience know here on PRN FM how they can get in touch with you, not just your website at anniebrook.com, but some of the things that what types of events or how you would like to have audience members reach out to you.
Well, when people go to my website, if they like to read, you can download free PDFs. I have a whole library that has things about birth trauma and communication skills, and I like giving away resources. And then I have online classes where I will guide them, or you can do self-paced. But there you get a membership site, you get videos, you get reflective writing and theory, and you start to be able to do the inner work And then people can always, I'm training therapists. Like right now, my big goal this year is to have people who are maybe already therapists but getting burnt out, and they want to add the depth of somatic work to their skill set, or they're just getting started, and I want them to be able to help people. Because I've found, I've been a therapist for 40 years, and the more I got into the hidden story and the body awareness and the neuroscience, the more efficiently I could help people. Because therapy is expensive, and I want people to graduate. So if there's therapists out there, they can come on in and get training. And I would say also I have an Instagram account. You can go to Instagram.com/Annie Brook Therapy, and Brook is Brook. There's no E on it. You can go to Annie Brook Therapy. I also have a YouTube channel which has information about, working with adoption imprints and just everything I've been pulling together all these years. I feel like I've finally got all the pieces in place that people could probably find an entry point to help themselves.
Oh,
and then every Friday I do, most Fridays I do a free 1 hour or 45-minute Facebook Live. So you just go to Facebook.com, the Brook Institute, or it'll be up on Instagram either way. But you can ask questions, and you can, I share practices that help people actually change their own behavior.
Mm.
That is awesome.
Yeah,
which is what people. Are you getting a lot of? Well, we can go on this, but I'm sure you're getting a lot of interest in what you're doing, and especially on Fridays and things. There are a lot of people who I think there's a lot of people out there now becoming highly aware that and are looking for transformation. And what you have to offer is just mind blowing with regard to where they can begin to kind of make that, the roots of making that transformation for themselves.
Oh, that's 100%. To me the exciting part, right? If we could all have our own little piece of transformation and enjoy our life more and care for others more, wow, that would be transforming. Thank you both for what you do in this time.
Yeah. Oh, my goodness, Annie. I go back to that quote, and I think you're one of the things that helps move the clouds so that people can see the sunshine and feel it really deep in their heart. And I'm going to let Michael close. I'm just so grateful for your time and for sharing and all the work that you do. And Michael, as you do so eloquently, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Well, first, let me say, Annie, thank you so much for taking the time out of your busy day of helping, busy life and helping people.
My pleasure.
To come on. And I really hope that our audience takes a moment to look at your resources, to tap into what you have to offer, because it is something that everyone can benefit from. I find that the awareness of something is half gets you halfway there, and when you can become aware of your own behaviors and have the self-awareness to look outside of those behaviors to find out exactly, become aware enough to wonder and seek resources that can help you understand why you're acting the way that you do. It is amazing. I know my mind has been blown by this episode, and I really appreciate your coming on. And I want to remind our audience that this is an episode you're definitely going to want to share. So outside of PRN-FM on Saturday evenings, we do have this on Connect to Love, the podcast. You want to make sure that you tap into this episode. Listen to it a couple of times. There's a lot of treasure here. A lot of treasure, and I'm sure you will, as I like to say, find something in here, nuggets that you can find to enrich your life and your personal transformation and evolution. And I would say until our next show, this has been a pleasure, a real pleasure.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much, everybody.